Here's the story with a few word changes while keeping the content and structure intact. The surveillance footage on my smartphone displayed everything in razor-sharp high definition. There was Susan Peaton, our HOA president, sneaking through my lodge like a common thief. She was opening cabinets, sifting through documents, and snapping photos with her device. What she didn't realize was that every single action was being recorded by 12 different cameras I'd set up just 2 weeks prior. In less than an hour, the sheriff's office would have her in custody. I purchased the Mountain Lodge in Pine Ridge Estates as my weekend retreat from the corporate grind. After 20 years of working 70-hour weeks in the city, I finally had enough saved to buy this little piece of heaven. The renovation took 6 months, but when it was finished, I had the ideal escape. 2 bedrooms, a stone hearth, and a wraparound porch with views of the valley below. The first hint of trouble came 3 days after I settled in. I was sitting on my porch enjoying my morning coffee when a silver Lexus rolled into my driveway. Out stepped a woman in her late 50s with impeccably styled blonde hair and a notepad. She introduced herself as Susan Peaton, president of the Pine Ridge HOA. With a sugary tone, she said she just wanted to welcome me to the community and review some rules. What followed was a 45-minute sermon about approved paint hues, acceptable mailbox designs, and the proper height for flagpoles. She informed me that my lodge's forest green trim would need to be switched to one of the 3 approved shades of taupe. The natural wood porch stain was also non-compliant, as was the bird feeder I'd hung from the oak tree. That had to be removed immediately. I listened courteously, nodded at appropriate moments, and mentally discarded her list of demands. The lodge was my property, bought fair and square, and I verified that the HOA rules were minimal before purchasing. Susan seemed to be inventing new regulations on the fly. Over the next few weeks, Susan's visits became more frequent and more invasive. She'd appear unannounced, measuring the height of my lawn with an actual ruler. She'd take pictures of my vehicles, claiming they were parked at improper angles. Once, she even knocked on my door at 7 a.m. to tell me that my trash bins were visible from the road for 12 minutes longer than the HOA guidelines supposedly permitted. That's when I decided to install the security system. 12 cameras covering every angle of the property, all with night vision and motion detection. The system sent alerts directly to my phone and stored 30 days of footage in the cloud. I told myself it was for wildlife observation, but deep down, I knew Susan's behavior was escalating. The breaking point came when I left for a 3-day business trip to Denver. I'd been gone less than 24 hours when my phone buzzed with a motion alert. Expecting to see a deer or perhaps a black bear, I opened the app. Instead, I saw Susan's Lexus in my driveway. I watched in disbelief as she walked straight to my front door and produced a key. Not just any key, but one that unlocked my door perfectly. She must have copied it from the realtor's lockbox before the sale finalized. My blood pressure surged as I watched her step inside my home like she owned it. The indoor cameras captured everything. Susan wandered from room to room, opening wardrobes and drawers. She photographed the contents of my fridge and took pictures of the mail on my kitchen counter. In my home office, she actually sat at my desk and started rifling through my files. She spent nearly an hour inside, documenting everything with her phone. Instead of rushing home to confront her, I took a deep breath and contacted the Pine Ridge Sheriff's Office. I explained the situation and emailed them links to the footage. The dispatcher seemed stunned and assured me they'd send deputies immediately. Then I called my attorney. Meanwhile, Susan was busy. According to neighbors who contacted me later, she'd started spreading rumors that my lodge was actually vacant. She claimed I'd abandoned the property and that it was becoming a safety hazard. She even posted on the Pine Ridge Community Facebook page that the lodge should be reassigned to someone who would properly maintain it according to HOA standards. 2 days later, I was still in Denver when I received another motion alert. This time, Susan wasn't alone. She'd brought 2 other HOA board members with her. They had garbage bags, measuring tapes, and what looked like paint swatches. I immediately called the sheriff's office again and learned that 2 deputies were already en route based on my earlier report. What happened next was pure karma. The body camera footage, which I later obtained through a public records request, showed the deputies arriving just as Susan was unlocking my front door again. She had the audacity to smile and wave at them like nothing was amiss. The lead deputy asked her what she was doing. Susan responded in her most authoritative tone that she was conducting an official HOA inspection of an abandoned property. She claimed she had full authority to enter any home in Pine Ridge Estates if she suspected violations. The deputy asked to see this authorization. Susan fumbled with her notepad and produced some generic HOA bylaws that said nothing about entering homes. When the deputy informed her that I had provided security footage of her previous unauthorized entry, Susan's demeanor shifted instantly. She went from confident to defensive, insisting that as HOA president, she had implied consent to ensure all properties met standards. She even tried to convince the deputies that I'd given her permission to enter whenever she deemed necessary. The deputies weren't convinced. They asked her to explain how she'd obtained a key to my home. Susan stammered something about emergency access for the good of the community. When they asked her to surrender the key, she claimed she'd left it at home. A quick search of her purse revealed not only my house key, but keys labeled with 3 other addresses in the neighborhood. Susan was arrested on the spot for criminal trespass and attempted burglary. The look on her face as they cuffed her was unforgettable. She kept insisting there had been a misunderstanding, that she was just trying to uphold property values. The other board members quickly distanced themselves, claiming they had no idea she was entering homes without permission. The trial was swift and decisive. I flew back from Denver and testified, presenting timestamps from my security footage that showed Susan entering my home, going through my personal belongings, and photographing private documents. The prosecutor also presented evidence that Susan had entered at least 2 other homes in the neighborhood using copied keys. Susan's defense was laughable. Her lawyer argued that she believed she was acting within her authority as HOA president. They claimed she was simply being thorough about maintaining neighborhood standards. The judge wasn't impressed, especially after viewing the footage of Susan reading my personal mail and photographing my bank statements. During her testimony, Susan doubled down, insisting that HOA presidents should have the right to inspect properties whenever they deemed necessary. She said with complete seriousness that privacy was less important than property values. Several jurors visibly rolled their eyes. The prosecutor presented one final piece of evidence that sealed Susan's fate. They'd found a notebook in her home labeled Property Violations Log, where she documented her illegal entries into 7 different homes over the past 2 years. Each entry included dates, times, and detailed notes about what she'd found inside. She'd even rated the cleanliness of people's closets and posted photos of their supposed violations in a private folder on her computer. Character witnesses for the prosecution included Margaret Thompson, a 78-year-old widow, who testified that Susan had entered her home while she was at a doctor's appointment and rearranged her furniture to better comply with feng shui principles. Another neighbour, James Crawford, revealed that Susan had stolen his spare key 3 years ago and had been conducting monthly inspections without his knowledge. He only found out when he installed his own security camera after noticing items moved in his home. The judge's expression grew increasingly stern as more evidence piled up. Susan had created a complex system of unauthorized surveillance, maintaining files on every household in Pine Ridge Estates. She had photos of people's garage contents, notes about their daily routines, and even recordings of private conversations she'd overheard while trespassing on their properties. During closing arguments, the prosecutor called Susan's actions a gross violation of privacy and an abuse of power that had terrorized an entire neighborhood. They emphasized that Susan had betrayed the trust of homeowners who believed their HOA president was looking out for their interests, not violating their most basic rights to privacy and security in their own homes. Susan's lawyer made one last desperate attempt to paint her as an overzealous but well-meaning community leader. They argued that her intentions were pure, that she only wanted to maintain the high standards that made Pine Ridge Estates a desirable place to live. The argument fell flat when the prosecutor reminded the jury that good intentions don't justify breaking into people's homes and photographing their personal documents. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman read the verdict with clear conviction. Guilty on all counts: criminal trespass in the first degree, attempted theft, breaking and entering, stalking, harassment, and violation of privacy laws. The judge's sentencing was harsh but fair. Along with 18 months in prison and $50,000 in fines, Susan was ordered to pay restitution to all affected homeowners, complete 500 hours of community service, and was banned from serving on any HOA board for life. She was also required to surrender all keys, documents, and photos she'd illegally obtained. As the bailiff led her away, Susan's perfect composure finally cracked. She screamed that the HOA would hear about this and that property values would plummet without her oversight. Her final words before the courtroom doors closed were a shrieked threat to sue everyone involved for defamation of character.